Pro lens. I'm here on behalf of Precision Camera and Tamron USA. My name is Jillian. Hello and welcome. If you have any questions, there will be a portion at the end for questions and answers, just an open discussion about macro, whatever you happen to be working on. But please use the chat function there on the side of the screen, and let's go through the questions at the end. But I'm happy to be here. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes. I'll let everyone kind of fall in. Just making sure we're all in the right place. I'll be back in a moment. Yes, please, let me know where you guys are coming from. Phoenix, Webster, Rockford, wow. We've got Sarah Strick here. She is our Texas regional sales representative. So if you've ever been to a Precision Camera sales event or demo in the Texas area, you have met Sarah. She has been so much fun to work with. I'm coming from Minneapolis. This is a picture of the skyline there up on my wall. It's finally warming up here. The leaves are starting to bloom. Hopefully we can get out and get some macro going now that the sun is starting to shine. Sioux Falls, I think I know who you are. Hey, Rick. Oh, 80 degrees will not happen here soon enough. All right, 12:02. How about we get going? The presentation in itself will only be about 20, 30 minutes. This is a quick in-depth look at macro photography. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Jillian Bell. I'm a national technical representative for Tamron USA. Basically, I travel the country most of the time, except for now. We are all home, of course, but I teach photo workshops. I give lectures on all sorts of different genres, from portraiture to macro to street and architecture. I've been with them now for 9 years. It'll be 9 years next month, so I'm really excited to be a part of the Tamron family. My passion is macro. My whole life I look for the subtle details, and I love highlighting things that I find interesting about different subjects. I live and breathe it. Believe it or not, this class can actually take 4 hours if we really get into it. So happy to answer any questions that you have at the end. And if this goes long, if you want to know anything in the future, I'll leave my contact information up at the end as well, so we can continue the conversation on another day. I'm also going to spend most of the time talking about the 90mm macro. This is my go-to macro lens. Can kind of go through some of the frequently asked questions and features about that lens specifically. There's a couple photos that are taken with the new 24 and 35 Sony primes. They have a great wide angle macro feature that I've been playing around with. And so, but most of it is going to be all taken with the 90mm macro. First thing that we talk about when we talk about macro photography is ratios. I tend not to really get into the equations and the algorithms and all of the numbers because it gets very convoluted. But when we talk about a true macro lens, this is something that can only be done with a true macro. It gives you a life-size representation of what that object would look like if you were to place it on the sensor. So imagine, if you will, don't actually do this, you will damage your camera. But if you open up your sensor so you can see it, and then place a quarter inside your camera. Again, don't do this at all, please. But imagine what that image is going to look like. You know, we all know what size a quarter is. If we print out a 16:20 print of that image, that quarter is going to be 16 inches in diameter. So true macro. It's a life-size representation of what that object would look like if you place it on the sensor. Anything that can give you a quarter life size or 25% life size or better is considered a close-up lens. So that same quarter on the left-hand side of the screen is 4 inches in diameter. Basically, it's, again, quarter life size. 1 to 2 macro is considered half life size. And I like Tamron. I keep gravitating towards the brand because really any lens that we come out with has that close-up capability. And again, being a macro photographer, I can shoot detail with pretty much everything in our lineup. But really, at the end of the day, what defines macro? It's a different way of thinking. It comes down to what you find interesting about the subject you're photographing, and it has less to do with what the actual subject is. And this is an idea that you can really translate to all genres, whether it's landscape, whether it's portraiture, again, whether it's macro photography. Really think about what's inspiring you at that moment and how can you best highlight that as your subject matter. This is a great example. This is a butterfly wing. Love butterflies. They are something that I tend to go photograph from time to time, but it's less about the butterfly. It's more about the subtle line work. It's more about the repeating shapes. Makes it a little bit more abstract. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Here's another example. The quarters, again, when they started doing state-specific coins and currency, I started doing this whole series about photographing the detailed carvings and all the artwork on the back of quarters. I'll have more on working with metal at the end of the presentation. Okay, just kind of going through just the feature technology of, again, the 90mm macro. Some of the first things we talk about are what do all of the switches and dials mean? I get these questions all the time on workshops and wanted to clarify and make sure that we are all on the same page. First one you see on the left is VC. This stands for vibration compensation. It is our form of stabilization here in Tamron land. And I like the 90 in the fact that it not only has our standard 3-axis stabilization, but it has a special XY shift. So if I've got any videographers out there doing handheld or even in handheld macro land, this stabilization is kind of like having a gimbal head built into your lens. It goes X, Y, and Z in all directions, and then it also does pitch and yaw. It's very stable. It's very smooth. As far as the autofocus is concerned, the USD motor, it's the ultrasonic silent drive. It is the beefed up bigger brother of our autofocusing systems. This is the ones that we often put in sports lenses because it is fast, it is quick, it's very accurate. And this is important, this USD motor is important in the 90mm macro because with a minimum focusing distance of 11 inches from the sensor, out of focus at inches looks the same as out of focus as at 100 feet or 100 yards. So you need a motor that's going to be responsive. You need a motor that's going to be fast so you can help find the contrast and find focus faster. Here's a great example of the VC in action. Another place I'll frequent is train museums, model train museums. They have such little things, miniatures, little setups that are already there. The problem being they're mostly indoors. There's not a lot of light, and I can't bring my tripod in. So I rely on that stabilization to be able to take crisp photographs at 1/8 of a second or slower than normal. This is with the stabilization turned off. When I turn it on, you can automatically see how that sharpness returns and how I'm able to get sharp photographs at a much slower shutter speed. The other feature that the USD motor and the VC play together with is with moving subjects. So if you're photographing bees or butterflies or really anything that's flying around, having that fast tracking motor and the stabilization in play, this helps the camera anticipate where your subject's going to go, and it helps, again, just be more responsive for you. This is taken at a butterfly conservatory. I think this one was down in Florida, and the advantage here, again, it's a controlled environment, but the probabilities are definitely working for you because not only are there butterflies, but there's thousands of them flying around. They're used to people, so you can get very, very close to them. Butterfly world, yes, anytime that you can get to a place like that, it's a great place to practice. Go in the early morning or later in the evening, they won't be as active. If you go in the middle of the afternoon, they react a lot to sunlight and warmth, so they're going to be busier. They're going to be flying around more in the middle of the day. We use a center-weighted focusing system here because that's going to help find contrast faster. And I'm also going to use a multi-burst mode. So 1 out of the 100 that I take is going to be the one that I want. Again, we're all just playing the odds here. Now, comparing the standard 90 millimeter macro to a wide angle macro, this one is definitely much more environmental. This one was taken with the new 20 f2.8 1:2. So again, it'll give us a half life size. I am literally inches to the front of this butterfly. I'm actually taking my photograph out like this, relying on my live view, relying on the fact that this being a wide angle, my chances are greater to get the composition the way that I want. But this is becoming a new favorite for me. Another key feature that we want to note is just the moisture-proof aspect of this lens. The new 90 millimeter, if you look at the lens catalog or on Tamron-USA.com, we actually have 2 90s listed as macro lenses. One is full-featured, VC USD. It's got this moisture-proof and extra durability. The other one is great for manual focus. It's been in our lineup for well over 10 years, and it's more of a budget-conscious piece. But if I had the choice between the two, I will definitely go with this full-featured model just because it is digitally enhanced. It provides better coatings and better clarity and sharpness and more responsiveness overall, again, because of this added technology. But the moisture proofing and the front element coatings, we've got fluorine coating and an E-band coating. These elements combined provide a lens that you can literally take anywhere with you. I'm not going to be afraid of some early morning dew. I'm not going to be afraid of the misters turning on in the greenhouse, a little bit of rain or snow. If I take it to the beach and there's kind of sand blowing around, I'm not going to be worried about taking my gear out with me. It's going to be a lens that will go with you wherever you are. I'm not going to recommend submersing it. You definitely don't want to dunk the lens in any sort of water. If you're in an area with salt water, again, salt is a different beast. Make sure your lenses are clean and dry before they go back into storage. But the moisture-proof technology and the E-band coating, the fluorine coatings, are really good combatants against the elements. So don't be afraid to take your lens out when you get a moment to get out and about. Here's some great examples. Early morning dew. It is not beneath me to sit in a ditch for hours photographing the rain, photographing the water droplets on the grass. It's a really great moment to just sit and relax. This photograph was actually taken flipped reversed, but I like emphasizing the linear striations of the grass and just how the water droplets are falling there. And I just like this composition a little bit better. You can definitely take a spray bottle outside as well. I'm not opposed to that. At the end of the day, just make sure you are open and honest. So if you create an image and someone asks you how to do it, definitely say, yes, I put water droplets on here, or I was able to bring in that dragonfly with a little bit of sugar water spritzed on the flower. Creativity is a wonderful thing. Just be honest. Here's another one. These are a type of tiger lily. I'm not totally up on what plants are what. I just think they're pretty. So don't ask me a lot of greenery sort of questions. But in the greenhouse, it's very moist. Again, there was a lot of like mist that was coming down from time to time. And then this guy had a lot of pollen, had a lot of like sticky bits in the center there. And so I know my lens is protected against that. In the spring or in the fall when the pollen gets really bad outside, the lens is also protected against that. All right, the last question that I normally get, and this one is kind of the most common question that I get all the time. What does this little switch on the lens mean? This is called the distance limiter switch. And if you look on the lens, it's this one on the far side there, full. It's got 0.5 to infinity, and then it's got 0.3 to 0.5 meters. What this does basically helps the lens out in low contrast situations. So this is a distance limiter switch in the fact that, again, if your subject is out of focus at inches, or if your subject is out of focus at feet, it looks the same to your camera and to your camera sensor. And that is a really long distance for that autofocus to try to move back and forth. So So if you have good contrast, and 99% of the time, I'm going to leave that on full and let my lens do what it does best. But again, if I'm in those low contrast situations, if I notice it's struggling a little bit, you can move it to the middle position, which is 0.5 meters to infinity, which means I'm shooting portraiture, or I know my subject is 1.5 feet or further away. So it's not going to pay attention to anything that's really close to the lens. If I move the lens to the bottommost position, or the position that's closest to me, 0.3 to 0.5 meters, that means I know my subject is within 11 inches to 1.5 feet. I am shooting 1-to-1 macro. And that's going to tell the lens to forget about everything it sees that's further than 1.5 feet away. Again, just helps speed up the process in those really low contrast situations. The other cool feature with this switch is if you are fortunate enough to have a tap-in console, or if you send the lens in for updating of any kind at the customer service office when they open back up again, you can actually determine and you can change where those positions are. So I actually set mine up to go 11 inches to about 2 feet. I like to have a little bit more working distance on the close end. And then on the middle position, the far end, that's 1.5 feet to infinity. But I can physically change if I want it 10 feet, if I want it, 1 foot, whatever it is. This portion of the lens is customizable with the tap-in console. All right, enough about the lens specifically. Let's talk about technique. Macro at home. As I'm sure we are all getting used to our new routines here at home, I've been off the road for about a month and have been really enjoying putting together these virtual presentations. There's actually moments where I can go through my photographs and actually organize them, because this is something that doesn't happen on a normal day. It's also allowed me to kind of think about things that you can photograph here. When you are home and, trying to figure out what do you have that you look at every day that you can photograph and you find interesting. First thing that I always think of is flowers outside. One of my favorite things about macro photography is it doesn't matter what time of day it is. It doesn't matter what the weather's like. You can always photograph macro. This is a genre that I don't have to wake up before sunrise to get a good shot. I don't have to stay up until the moon sets to get the Milky Way images. It can be 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I've just finished lunch and I just want to go photograph. And macro allows me to do that. The disadvantage here is, if you go photograph in the middle of the day, a lot of the times lighting looks like this. How many times is it super bright outside and you've got harsh shadows? And how do we actually combat that? The first thing to do is realize that your camera can't handle so much of an exposure shift like this. We need to even it out. And actually the best way to do that is just to create shade, especially with foliage outside. Foliage, flowers, these are elements that are naturally really reflective. So I might use a polarizing filter. I definitely want to soften the light. Here I'm just standing in the way of my flowers. But I've also done like a 5-in-1 reflector kit. You get one of those big pop-up things that can be white or diffused or black or whatever. And it just helps instantly create shade. I've also done things like getting a white 5-gallon bucket to create a white background. You cut a hole in the side of it and stick that around your subject to simplify things. Once you get the lighting right, then you play with composition. You get something that's a little bit stronger, something that's a little bit visually appealing. This with the lines of the stems and the repeating shapes of the poppies there in the background. I like this photo better. And again, once you get the lighting right, that's the first trick. You can play with composition and work from there. Another one with flowers. Again, think about what do you find interesting? What are the eyes in a portrait to a flower? It's normally the stamen, the pollen pods there in the center. That's generally what's going to gravitate people to appreciate flowers. It could also be the way the petals are kind of layering in a rose, or I don't know, different things like that. This one's an orchid. I love that you can't really tell, but it's got the little bit of color in the background, a nice, soft, shallow depth of field. This one is in my friend's garden. And when I have a very busy scene, like the poppies, or some other times, like when I'll go to a daisy field or like a tulip garden or something like that, I'm going to carry around with me about a paper's size sheet of color. This one, I had some bright green polyester fabric that I spray glued to some cardboard. I have black fabric boards, I've got white fabric boards, I've got aluminum foil that's again wrapped around cardboard. You know, these are things, they're really only about this big, but you can stick them in the background of your shot to simplify your background, to make it look a little bit more studio. I also like to look at leaves. Look at flowers from all angles. This is a great little daisy that was in my window looking for light. And it caught me just how that little leaf under the bottom looks like a heart. I love the light, how it was coming through. It was just sitting next to a window. Again, it's all about looking for things. I'll also try to find some deformed petals, you know, something that's going to set your image apart from every other image that you're going to see of the same flower. You know, what makes this one unique? What makes it yours? All right, moving on to jewelry. Just got a couple more slides, and then I'm going to scroll through the pictures or the questions and see where we're at. Photographing jewelry is another question I get a lot. Most of my studio work is with found objects, things I find interesting, setting them up. I tend not to use lights unless I'm either dealing with really low light or I need to direct the shadows in a certain way. They make these little LED boxes that are dimmable. You can change the colors, temperature of them. Those work very well. I also get the question of, do I use a ring light quite a bit? And I like a ring light when I'm using a flash, just because using studio light or using a flash gives it a crispness and a clarity. It makes the images look more studio instead of natural. You have to be really careful though with the ring light, because direct flash is very flattening. It is not very visually appealing. So what happens is it looks like a flash photograph. So you have to sometimes take it off of your lens and move it around to the side or underneath or behind, you know, play with the angles so that the lighting overall has that clarity, but it looks a little more natural. Oh, so key tips for photographing jewelry. I'll generally use a circular polarizing filter, again, just to cut out reflections. Helps with color saturation overall. I'm going to cut out any unwanted reflections with black boards. So if I have any unruly back reflections that I just can't get rid of with a polarizer, I'm going to actually, again, take one of my black pieces of board. It's either foam core or cardboard or something like that, and move it and try to figure out exactly where that reflection is coming from so that they're something I don't have to Photoshop after the fact. And then always, if at all possible, diffuse your light. If you're dealing with a window case situation, this is the 35mm 2.8. Just some quick street product work while I was walking around New York last October. In order to cut your own personal reflection out of the light, don't be afraid to take the lens hood off and put your lens directly up against the glass. That's what I did here. It helps shade out any reflections that you have, and it just helps give you a cleaner image overall. Wearing black doesn't help or doesn't hurt either. Wearing black or dark colors is going to be one less color that's reflected into your image. Secret, that's why all photographers wear black. Here's another little fun tip. When you're working with found metal objects, in this case keys, I've done this with broken gears, with pieces of broken CDs. Get a little bit of double stick tape and make it less sticky by sticking it on your jeans or like on the felt background. And you can actually put this on the back of your metal objects so they won't slip around. Metal as a whole is a very slippery material, and if I get my still life set up just the way that I want it, I don't need the images to shift. I don't want the elements to shift around before I take the image. So using a little bit of double stick tape or even rubber cement on the back will help kind of keep everything in place. I see the question about small collectibles and figurines. How small are they? You can answer that. That will help me answer the question. The last couple of slides are more inspirational, found objects, photographing in your home. This image is of it's an Edison bulb above my island. Sorry about that. Turned on very, very dim, just allowing the filaments to kind of fill the frame. And that little black hook there, I found that interesting. Standing on my island, photographing this as it's suspended from the air at about a 20th of a second. It's a good testament to the stabilization system of that lens. For my friends who like to cook, here's some garlic that I was photographing before dinner the other night. To me, with the light and the way that was just on the dark wood, it kind of reminded me of an old-fashioned oil painting. Just love the subtle color and the texture there. If you guys know how to cook, you are in a better place than I am. I love throwing things together, making sandwiches and stuff. That's about it. A couple more. These are just some old hoses that were connected to my dad's lawnmower the last time I was home. Can't imagine how old that piece of machinery is, but I think he got it from his dad, who got it from his dad. Like, this thing is an antique. And it's just so fun to photograph because it's so patinaed with all the oil and the grass, and it's so fun. Last one. Yep. This one is one of my cassettes in the library. And I love showing this photo because it's such a testament to found objects. A lot of the younger photographers that I deal with, like my nieces and nephews who are 10, 15, they don't really know what cassettes are. So I show them this picture and I was like, they can't guess what the object is until I show them. Cool. Thank you for the feedback. All right. That's the end of the formal section. Let me kind of scroll through the chat window and see what you guys have been talking about. Figurines 1 to 5 inches tall, pretty small. That's actually fairly large for macro land. If we're photographing an object like this, big size, you can do this with like a 28 to 75. I'll use a 70 to 200, 2.8 quite a bit. The goal here is just to get a clean background. And so what I tend to do with subjects like that is I'll find a good back chair, like a standard dining room chair, and I'll drape a piece of fabric over it. So you've got your background sweep. I've used everything from an actual backdrop to paper to a pillowcase to a sheet folded onto itself a couple of times. Really anything that you can do to help, again, cut out that background. And then I'll set this setup up against a window. So with a nice window, kind of like I've got set up here, I've got a window like right here, and then I've got my subject, and then I might kick a reflector in from the other way so that you have two lighting sources. And that's about it. The closer you can get to that window, especially if the sun is on that side of the house, it's going to give you more light. I like to use a longer focal length for something like that, like I said, like a 200 or at least a 100 millimeter lens, because that'll help compress the background and make it less noticeable. Your f-stop is going to be longer. F11, F16, something like that is going to be your go-to for things that are that size. With the Sony lens, which are not true 1-to-1, do you also use an extension tube? I have not used an extension tube yet, John. That's because currently I don't have one available. If I did have an extension tube, I would probably use it and play around with it. So not a macro for small figurines. No, you can really do that. Your purpose, I think you could photograph with any lenses. All right. For your key photo, were they on a table or did you handhold tripod? So for the key photographs, I'm going to try to lump these conversation topics together, so I'll try to get through everybody. But if I miss something, John or Sarah, please remind me. They were on a table. So this is something that's called flat lay macro, in the fact that my subject was on a flat top surface, and then I was photographing it from the top down. My camera was on a tripod. I was using live view and a remote because in those situations, you either need an assistant who can read your mind, or you need to be able to work hands-free so you can literally move things around inside that live view image frame. You can do it handheld if you want. You don't have to use the live view, but in my experience, it's easier on your back. It's easier for focus if you can kind of stand back and create with a little bit of different distance. Available for Sony mirrorless full frame. Yes, so we now have 6 lenses available for Sony mirrorless full frame. The 90mm, we do not have a true macro available for that yet. But the 20, 24, 35 have a great wide angle macro feature. The 70 to 180mm f2.8 was announced today. So I know that Precision is taking pre-orders on that. I'm not sure with everything going on when those are actually going to be delivered. Talked about the spray bottle. Oh, good. Let me scroll back down to the bottom. We're talking about focus stacking. Yes, you could also stack. So if you have smaller objects, I will do this for like ring photographs that I do, or I set up little scenes with little figurines. I've got like flamingos and dragons and like just random stuff. I think I've got an astronaut and a spaceship that I play around with. With something like that, my objects are teeny tiny. And so an f32 does not give you the depth of field that you want. If I work with focus stacking, Helicon is another software that's pretty reasonable that you can use. I don't do it a lot because I'd rather be out shooting and get it right in camera than spend time photoshopping or making. And honestly, with all the traveling that I do, I have not had time to really sit and work on it. So that is actually one of my goals now that I'm home and I have some time to really get creative again and work on some of these ideas. But with focus stacking, what you do is you basically take multiple photographs like you would in an HDR photo, and you focus on different points from the foreground all the way to the background. Could be as little as 3 shots. I've seen as many as 80 photographs. And you take all of those images and you compress them together with hopefully a software. I've seen people do this with Photoshop and it takes so long, and they have a talent that I do not have. And it takes all the sharp bits and it compiles one image that is sharp from front to back. It's pretty cool. But if I can get the amount of sharpness that I want with a longer depth of field like an f32, I won't necessarily bother with focus stacking. Because for the macro work that I take in my style, I like a more shallow depth of field look. It helps give the image depth and it gives it perspective, and it really helps put focus on that one moment that I want to pull forward as the main subject. I feel that a lot of times, especially with flowers or with some found objects, like if it's all sharp, I don't know what I'm looking at. So I like more of a soft, shallow depth of field look. I know George Lepp, not personally. I respect George Lepp. Have not used the Zarine stacker yet. Any tips or tricks for shooting macro if you don't have a macro lens? Yes, of course. And I love how you guys are all chiming in. I mean, this is definitely a community of photographers, and so many times even when I'm out instructing or teaching a workshop, I view it more as a collaborative because everyone's got their own way to do the same thing. So thank you, everyone, for kind of chiming in and helping each other out. If you don't have a macro lens yet, you can definitely do close-up with most lenses. So close-up is going to be, I am focusing on an area that is about the size of a 4x6. So this. I love the mirror. Think about a flower. Think about a butterfly. Think about a rusty hinge or a master lock or something like that. And what you do is you take your zoom lens and you zoom it all the way out to its furthest telephoto. So if you have like the 18 to 400, for instance, I'd zoom it all the way out to 400 millimeter. And then you place yourself at the minimum focusing distance. We measure the minimum focusing distance from the sensor plane, not from the end of the lens. It's a little icon that looks like a circle with a line through it up on the top of your camera. So we measure from that. And if we are within the minimum focusing distance at the furthest magnification, that's how you get your macro. I know even the 18 to 55 does it, the 70 to 300 does it. Pretty much every lens out there has some sort of magnification quality. It just depends on how close you need to get and how small your object is. So try that first. There are some macro filters. I saw that suggested as well. Macro filters that you screw on the front of your lens sometimes work, but it's not going to be as clean. You're not going to get the sharpness and the quality that you might be looking for, but it's an option. I've even seen people take an old nifty 50 from a used bin and flip it backwards. That way, there's something with the refracting of light. It will actually give you a macro lens, but there's certain adapters and manual exposure that you use to get that to work. You are welcome, Christine. Thank you for being here. Oh, I think I'm getting a present. Where would we be without our shipping, people? Found adding a section tube. Yes, an extension tube. That is something I have not talked about yet. Extension tubes are different from teleconverters, and I happen to grab them both so you can see the difference. Extension tubes are hollow. You can see that there's nothing in here other than electronic connections. This is a cheat that allows the camera to think it's further away than it actually is. A teleconverter, on the other hand, has actual optics in it. And this only works with certain lenses. Definitely check your compatibility. This is more for telephoto or wildlife if your lens can't magnify as much as you want for objects that are far away. There is one application for a teleconverter with macro, and that is with the 150 to 600 millimeter G2. If anybody has that lens out there, you get the 2x teleconverter, and at 600 millimeters, you can actually get 1 to 2.5 macro out of it. I'll use that setup with the tripod and a remote when I'm photographing my friend's honeycomb. He's got beehives in his farm that I've gone and photographed with that, because with my macro, I'm 2.5 feet away. It's less intrusive for the bees and safer for me, honestly. But with the extension tubes, generally they'll come in a 3-pack, so you've got ones of different sizes. I do not recommend starting right away, stacking all of them together. What happens is your depth of field, even at f32, gets really small, like a centimeter. And this can be a problem, again, because when you're trying to find focus, we're working with manual focus. And again, autofocus at inches looks the same as autofocus at infinity. So you really don't know where to start. And working with a tripod can be cumbersome because you have to like set it up, and like little adjustments will make a huge difference. David Akubian's fault. I like that. Yes, he is a salesman of sorts. Avid birder, if anybody is into bird photography, definitely check him out. He's one of our Tamron sponsored photographers. But what I'll do with my extension tubes, I'll do this with rings or earrings, brooches, like again, smaller things that I can set up with a tripod, is I'll find a subject, generally a couple apple boxes stacked up, or I'll work on a table. So again, I can stay upright and I don't have to be on the floor. And I'll set up my tripod and set it to minimum 1:1. So this will be with my 90 millimeter, all 3 extension tubes stacked on top at minimum focusing distance. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of angle it towards the table and set a ruler out so that I can see which number is sharp. That'll give me an idea of where to put my subject, and then I can go in and fine tune with manual focus after that. It's really tedious, but on the other regard, it's kind of zen. You know, you get those moments where you just need to sit and relax and play with little things for a while. I find it fun. Anything else? Bird nerds, me too. If anyone's been on my page the last couple of days, we had a migrating pod of pelicans come through yesterday morning. There was about 30 of them, and I was fortunate enough to take the kayak out and go photograph them for a while. All right. Did I miss anything? Looks like I think I've gone through all of the different questions. I do want to make a mention. Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you, Sarah. There is a special offering if anybody's interested. As kind of a thank you for joining us and helping Precision Camera as a brand, as a local dealer, they are offering our traditional bonus rebates online. So anytime there is a Tamron event, especially if Sarah is around and there, we do bonus rebates, which is an extra $25, $50 off any lens. Yes, must be purchased within the next 5 days. So no pressure, but please act quickly. And a new, oh wow. Other Tamron promotions that are going on right now, if you are Tamron fans and if you are part of our family, make sure that you're aware of the Tamron VIP program. Make sure your lenses make sure they're registered with us. If you get 4 or 5 or 6 or more, it's a program that you don't have to register or sign up for. Every January and February, they tally all the registration of our Tamron users, and they send out emails to welcome them to the VIP program. You get magazines. There's special promotions on classes. There's swag that they send you, like T-shirts and pins and stuff. It's just kind of a nice way to say thank you. Anything specific pricing wise, definitely talk to Precision. We've got Bryn with us from the store now. Casey does a lot of work with the events also. You can also talk to Sarah specifically. Sarah, would you throw your Facebook handle up so people know you too? Anything local, there are Tamron regional sales reps all around the country. So I know I've got people from Phoenix, which is Mark Morris. Michigan is Steve Ostrander. These are special sales reps. They are sales reps, but they're also photographers, and we really do a soft sell here. We're not really pushing the product too hard. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that you get what you need to take the photographs that you want. Find me at Sarah with Tamron on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome. She has one of the most active, apart from Mark, you've got one of the most active social media accounts that I'm aware of. And when they need a little extra help or when they need a fresh face to talk about photography, they call us. There's 8 Tamron tech reps who are nationally based. So I'm in Minneapolis, but I travel most of the time to all states. Doesn't matter where you are. I will travel. It's about 175 days a year when I get out of the house. All right. Any other macro questions? Last call before we kind of wrap this up. 45 minutes has kind of been my going rate. Bryn, are there any other classes that you'd like to mention that are coming up? When am I coming back to Michigan? Oh gosh, I don't know. I'll have to check. What part? Are you in Green Bay? Madison? That's Wisconsin. I apologize. 3 more Tamron webinars, same time, the next 2 Tuesdays. Yes, so Precision is really great at making sure that their calendar is up to date. There are so many opportunities. If those times don't work for you, go to the Tamron special feature page. So it's tamron-usa.com/events. That has everything because we are 100% online right now. You are welcome, Round Rock, Texas. I'm gonna have to look up all these places. I don't know where half of these cities are. Sorry about that. Yes. Okay. Well, with that, if there aren't any other questions, I will go ahead and say thank you for coming. You guys can take off if you want. Sarah, Bryn, if you want to hang tight for a couple of seconds after everyone leaves, we can definitely chit chat, or you can always call me afterwards too. No big deal. It's good to see everyone, quote unquote. Stay safe out there.